Thank you, everybody. Today is the Sierra Club of California Angeles Chapter and Water Committee Workshop. My name is Connor Everts from the Southern California Watershed Alliance. I will be co-facilitating with charming Evelyn from the Los Angeles Chapter and Sierra Club, extraordinaire volunteer. We are going to do a series of presentations and then a panel discussion. I'm going to moderate the first one, so be ready with your questions and answers. But first up, we have Parker Davis, who will introduce himself, and he's brought with him some, not props, but live plants. Go ahead, Parker.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, I guess while we wait for the slides to come up, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Parker Davis. I have a business called Californians. We are a native plant nursery and landscape design studio. We're currently popped up in Sierra Madre at 283 West Sierra Madre Boulevard. If anybody wants to come see us, we're open Tuesdays through Sundays, 9 a.m. till about 4:30 p.m. And we sell native plants and help people with their native plant garden design. I've been doing that for a few years. I grew up in Southern California. My mother was a biology teacher, and in the summertime she had like a forest school for us kids to keep me and her other science teacher friends' kids busy. And so I spent my summers roaming around the canyons of San Gabriel Mountains and kind of getting myself acquainted with the local ecosystems there. And as I grew up, I went away, did art school on the East Coast, and landed back in Southern California eventually. And I found that no matter what I was doing in my life, I was drawn to the trails around me. And I found that it was the plants that was bringing me around the trails, actually. And eventually I started wanting to bring some of those plants back home to my own my own garden, and so I started exploring the idea of native plant landscaping, which for somebody like me who is not a gardener by trade, or I wasn't trained in any way with horticulture or botany for that matter, but I found that it was actually really easy and accessible to learn about, and I got kind of obsessed. And I've been working with native plants now for probably over 5 years or so. So today we're going to talk about why we like native plants for the home garden, or for your business's garden for that matter, for landscaping in Southern California. And right here in the background of this photograph, actually, that big field of poppies that you see is my parents' front yard in Arcadia. My mom was really into the poppies, and she loved to go see the super blooms every time they popped up. We'd go out and see them in the deserts. And what a lot of people don't know, actually, is that Southern California used to boast quite a few super blooms of poppy fields right here around Los Angeles. Pasadena actually was the site historically of one of the largest super blooms of poppies in the whole state. In fact, the Spanish sailors that would round the coastline would use the poppy fields they could see from off the coast in Altadena as a navigational landmark, so they knew where they were. So yeah, we've lost a lot of our native plant landscapes in Southern California due to development, and we're currently suffering, from a variety of environmental crises, including climate change and loss of pollinator species. We're in the middle of one of the history's great mass extinctions. We hear all of this kind of doom and gloom in the news all the time, and we wonder what we can do ourselves to help improve the situation. And native plants are a really easy way to help a little bit with some of those problems and to address some of those issues right at home. So why would you choose native plants? Native plants are uniquely adapted to our climate. They need less water than most imported plants. So, people traditionally have, installed lawns, which were an import from Europe. They wanted to bring that aesthetic into their neighborhoods in the New World, as they referred to it, and they started installing lawns all throughout suburban neighborhoods of Southern California, which require an inordinate amount of water given our climate here. As you guys are all aware, in Southern California, we have a Mediterranean climate where we have cool, mild, wet winters, and then characterized by warm, dry summers, hot, dry summers, right? Getting increasingly hotter these days. And native plants that have evolved here in Southern California are uniquely adapted to thrive in those conditions. So you can oftentimes get away without watering a native plant garden at all. So that's one of the great benefits of it. And they're also tolerant, like we just said, of heat waves and drought. In Southern California, we're in the middle of a wet season this year, but it kind of works cyclically, as you've probably noticed, where we'll have many, many years of kind of below average rainfall, and then we get these big torrential rainfalls every 10 years or so. And that kind of makes up the quote-unquote average. And during those drier years, these plants have evolved to weather those drought periods and to weather the heat waves that we've been experiencing as well. They're also invaluable to local pollinators, and can you go back up, please? Invaluable to local pollinators and wildlife. So many local pollinators, native pollinators and bees, which we rely upon for all kinds of things, have unique relationships with these plants, and they really rely upon them. And they're also super low maintenance and look good year round. So those are some of the benefits of using native plants, and we're going to go into some of those in more detail during this presentation. All right, now you can scroll down. So some of the environmental benefits that we just touched on. You use a lot less water, right? California native plants have evolved to thrive in our Mediterranean climate. On average, a native garden uses less than half the water of a traditional garden. I've seen this over and over again, where the vast majority of the clients that come to me actually these days are looking to save on their water bill and to reduce the use of water in their landscape in general. And that's definitely something that is easily accomplished with native plants, as most of them, like we just covered, evolved to live with these kind of dry climates. Can you go back up a little bit, please? Wait, no, sorry, that's my bad. You got it. And then many species can go without supplemental irrigation entirely. So there's a lot of native plants that are really evolved well to live in super dry situations, and you can actually get away without watering your garden at all. So, in Southern California, where we're dealing with drought and a receding water table beneath our feet, we want to reduce the use of water as much as we can in our landscapes, and so native plants are a great option for that. Another environmental benefit is that pollinators and wildlife rely heavily on them. So there's a couple of concepts at play here: coevolution and symbiosis. So many of our local pollinators have co-evolved to develop symbiotic relationships with native plants. Now, what do I mean by that? That means that over the course of millions of years, in cohabitating with one another, they've come to rely upon each other. There's numerous examples of this, and there's a couple of them listed here below. So one of the examples that I like to mention to folks a lot is the relationship between Diadasia bees and our local mallow plants. So a little anecdote, when I was working at one of the native plant nurseries and gardens that I used to work at formerly before I had my own business, I was one morning exploring the garden and taking photographs, and I was photographing this chaparral bush mallow, which is a lovely local native plant that has pink globular flowers. And I noticed there were some bees curled up inside the flowers, and they were kind of still, and I was worried that actually maybe they had passed away or something inside the plant. But as I observed them for a little while longer, I noticed they started kind of moving around and starting to kind of wake up, I guess. And it was early in the morning, so sunlight was just barely starting to hit the plant. And, within 15, 20 minutes, they were kind of flying around and pollinating the planting. And I talked to a friend of mine about this Dee Soto from Xerces Society and asked her what I was observing, and she said those sounded like they could be Deodacia bees. So I looked it up, and sure enough, that's what they were. I was able to identify them. There's a lot of different species of them, but they oftentimes associate specifically with mallow plants. So these bees actually sleep inside the flower blossoms of the mallow plants at night, and the flowers kind of close up on them during the night, and then open up again in the morning when the sunlight hits them, and the bees wake up and go about their pollinated business. That's kind of a fun little story, I thought. Another great example is the relationship between the wild cherry plant and our local coyote. So this is a really fascinating story of coevolution and symbiosis. Wild cherries have cyanide in the seeds that are poisonous to consume. And so the coyotes, in order to consume the fruit without poisoning themselves, had to co-evolve a soft bite in order to consume the fruit without cracking open the seed and poisoning themselves. Furthermore, there's also a coating on the outside of the seed that prevents germination unless it passes through the digestive tract of a coyote, and its stomach acids actually eat away at the outer coating on the seed and allow it to germinate into a new tree. So this is a really fascinating example of how you can't have wild cherries without coyotes, because the coyotes really help in distributing and propagating that plant. Another great example that's really famous these days, very well known, often talked about, is the relationship between monarch butterflies and local species of milkweed. There are still plenty of gardeners out there that are unfortunately planting tropical species of milkweed that are imported from southern Mexico, which are popular in the garden because they are evergreen and flower year-round. However, that creates a dilemma for the monarchs, which are basically confused by their presence of those flowers during the months when they're supposed to be migrating elsewhere. Furthermore, the use of tropical milkweed can spread a deadly pathogen called OE, shortened for OE. And that has been highly detrimental to the populations of monarch butterflies in the United States. So we're really trying to encourage people to stop planting tropical milkweed and start planting our local native milkweeds, which are beautiful and ephemeral and wonderful additions to any native garden. So that is that. Can we go to the next slide, please? And then we'll go into some of the aesthetic benefits of California native plants. California obviously has a captivating beauty. It's renowned worldwide for how spectacular our landscapes are, and a big part of that is because of our plant communities. We have stunning wildflower displays. Like we talked about earlier, Pasadena, in fact, used to be the site of one of the largest displays of poppy blooms in the state. We've lost that. You still find historic photographs of some of the old poppy field meadows in Altadena and the foothills. And they were quite impressive. We also have a whole host of magnificent tree specimens to choose from. A lot of times what comes to mind first are our big redwoods in Northern California, which are not a great option for Southern California. In fact, when we talk about California native plant gardening, I always have to say that there's a caveat there that it's really your local California native plants. California is a huge state with an enormous diversity in terms of climate that stretches from north to south and east to west as you move away from the coast. And so therefore, it's really important that you study your local plant communities and really try to focus your efforts on them for best results. So here in Southern California, we have the coast live oak, which is another iconic tree that is really well evolved to deal with our dry summer climate. They're evergreen trees, so they provide shade throughout those hot months. They have a waxy coating on their leaf. They've evolved to actually, reduce transpiration during those times. They are really one of the most precious resources that we have in Southern California. Historically, you were able to walk from the foothills of the San Gabriels all the way to the coast without ever leaving the shade of an oak tree. You know, underneath an oak tree, it's like 10, 15 degrees cooler than it is outside of the shade of an oak tree. So as we get into these crazy climate events that we're having with these wild heat waves, they become increasingly important. They're a free, natural source of air conditioning for us. And they can really offset the heat islands effects of all this concrete that we've introduced into the urban environment. We have also some really wonderfully aromatic shrubs. I actually brought one of them today. It's kind of hard to see in the dark over there on the table, but maybe if the lights come back on a little bit, I can show you some of those plants. We have white sage over there on the table, which is one of the ones that really characterizes the sage shrub ecosystem of Southern California. It's a beautiful gray-green foliage and has a wonderful display of light pink flowers in the springtime that all sorts of pollinators love. It'll be the center of attention while it's blooming, where you get all sorts of hummingbirds and butterflies and bees swarming around its blossoms. And then as they turn into seed, then you have these goldfinches that come in and you start eating the seeds off the tall stalks. And then they knock a few of those seeds down in the ground, and the towhees and other species of local birds come in and eat the seeds off the ground. So it's a whole ecosystem right there with that one plant. It's also a plant that people sort of misguidedly want to burn a lot of the time in order to try to connect with some sort of spiritual tradition that they really don't have any connection to. And so it's being poached, unfortunately, out of our mountains right now and bundled up into smudge sticks and sweatshops and sold on Etsy and gas stations and all across the world. People are burning these sage sticks that are really sacred to our local Native American tribes who have used it for medicine for many, many years. And they're having a harder and harder time finding it because it's all being poached out of the mountains. So another great reason to grow your own white sage to offset that effect. There are also, Southern California was also characterized largely by big, broad grasslands in between the coast live oak woodlands. And we've lost a lot of that land. We lost a lot of it early on, those plant communities, to grazing agriculture practices that wiped out a lot of those species. So oftentimes we don't even really know what we've lost in these cases. However, there are still a number of really beautiful native grasses available for people to plant at home, and you can create a really striking, beautifully textural, colorful, ephemeral effect in your front yard that really outshines a lawn any day. And for me, context is key. I went to art school, and we learned, about how important the context that an object or a painting or whatever was being viewed in, how that influences the perception of it and the reading of it. And to me, a native plant garden that reflects its local terroir really adds a sense of place to your home and gives you a kind of grounds you in your location. And I think that's a really comforting effect in a lot of ways. And it just looks the best. Besides the fact that, again, since these plants have evolved for so many years to live with our summer dry conditions, they just tend to fare best during those hot summer months. So they tend to look better than a lot of the plants that you import from other places. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please. We'll cover the economic benefits, because everybody, money makes the world go around, right? California native plants and gardens are inexpensive. Plants are low cost. You can go out and buy a little $10 1-gallon ground cover sage, for example, and stick that thing in the ground, give it a little bit of water, and within a few months, it can sometimes spread up to 6 feet wide. So you can really cover a lot of your ground when you're replacing a big lawn with native ground covers very quickly, actually, and very inexpensively. They use a lot less irrigation, which means reduced water bill. Touched on that earlier. Pretty straightforward. And They're also extremely low maintenance. Gardens typically only require about 4 maintenance days a year. We're talking like a couple of really brief, cleanups here and there, and then maybe a couple of heavier days, where you work for a few hours with the crew, pruning stuff and getting everything zhuzhed up for the season. But generally speaking, it's a lot less than what you would typically require for maintaining a lawn, which people generally are mowing like once every week or two. Again, a lot less water, a lot less pruning, all that kind of stuff. So they're generally a cheaper option than traditional gardens as well. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So here are some additional resources for you to explore if you're interested in pursuing this further. There are a bunch of great organizations and websites online you can check out. You should always obviously join your local Native Plant Society. CNPS.org is the website for the California Native Plant Society. There are dozens of chapters around the state. I'm a member of both the Santa Monica Mountains chapter and the San Gabriel Mountains chapter of CNPS. And Calscape.org is another website that they've developed, which is a really great resource for folks learning about native plants. You can actually type in your address to that website, and it'll give you a whole list of plants that are native to your location. You can further refine that list, and I highly suggest that you do explore the advanced search features on that website and check boxes like commonly available in nurseries, easy to maintain. You can also check boxes for whether you're dealing with a site that has, a lot of sun or part shade or full shade, whether or not it's an area that, gets a lot of water. Maybe there's drip from an air conditioner in this one area or whatever it is. Or maybe all the water just collects from your property in one zone. Or maybe it's really dry most of the time, and you want a garden for that. So you can kind of put in all that criteria, and it'll give you a really nice tight list of California native plants that are appropriate for that situation. You can also look at LasPalitas.com, which is a great website. Has tons of really great information on it. Theodore Payne Foundation is another local organization that's does a lot of great work in education. And then there's me. You can email me at parker@hardycalifornians.com. Check us out on Instagram at hardycalifornians. Come visit us at the nursery, 283 West Sierra Madre Boulevard, Sierra Madre, California. We're open from 9 to 4:30, Tuesday through Sunday. Real quick before I go, 2 more things I wanted to show you. I forgot to put on the presentation. A couple of books that are really great. California Native Plants for the Garden by Carol Bornstein, David Frost, and Bart O'Brien. It's a wonderful resource, as is Designing California Native Gardens by Glenn Keeter and Alri Milberg. So those are 2 great books you can get at the gift shop in our nursery or online. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate everybody's time.
Show off your plants.
Oh, and the plants. I forgot to show off my plants that I brought. I brought all these cool plants to show you guys, and I didn't even get to show them. So this is the white sage. This is a Salvia apiana. It smells amazing. I think it's kind of filled the whole room here with its aroma, and we're all kind of enjoying that. Very therapeutic and calming. I also brought in Salvia californica, our local bush sunflower, which gets big yellow blossoms this time of the year. It's also a really inexpensive plant to work with in that it spreads readily from its seeds. They will germinate without any extra attention from you in the garden, so you plant one of these things and you'll get a dozen. Ribes rubinifolium. This is Catalina Island currant. This has these little burgundy blossoms. I don't know if you can see it on the feed or not, but they're quite cute. And hummingbirds come up and pollinate these things. If you rub the leaves, which you can't do on there, it's a great scratch and sniff plant, but hard to get this through the internet, obviously. But it smells wonderful. You get the idea why they call it Catalina Island perfume is one of its names. And then I also brought in a giant deer grass. These things get to be like 5 feet by 5 feet if you want to let them get that big. I used to always think it was called deer grass because the deer would eat it. Evidently, it's called deer grass because the deer actually sleep on it, which I think is so cute. So they nest in it and rear their young around them. It's a great plant to add to the garden as well. So thanks again for having me. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you,
Thank
Parker.
you.
Thank you.
And those resources will be on the website as well when we post the program. All right. I really enjoyed that. I've been doing this for a long time, but taught me some new things, and I appreciate the view of the amnesia for the natural history that was once here. and how can we recreate a small part of that while respecting others. So